Have you ever wondered what the media and big tech is hiding from you? Like massive stories that actually affect you in your life that they don't want you to see because they make the left and the Biden administration look bad. Well, now there's a podcast dedicated to exposing all of that each and every day. So download the fastest growing podcast in the conservative movement, the Ben Ferguson Show podcast right now. That's right. You can listen to Ben Ferguson Show podcast on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Download it right now.
Stay right here for our final news roundup and information overload.
All right, news roundup, information overload, our 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. One of the races we've been following is the great state of North Carolina, and I mean that. I love the state of North Carolina. If you've never been to the mountains of North Carolina, you got to go. It's so beautiful. It's majestic up there. Anyway, Ted Budd has run a great campaign, leading in the polls, but take nothing for granted. North Carolina historically is a very close state. It's a must-win state for Republicans. It's another hold state. Anyway, Ted Budd has been running a campaign against another radical, Democrat, Sherry Beasley, another anti-woke police extremist. This is his final closing ad, this election season.
I'm Ted Budd, and I approve this message.
Joe Biden's disastrous economy is on the ballot by the name of Sherry Beasley. Biden's massive tax hike on working families, weak leadership, and reckless spending that made everything more expensive. Beasley backs it all. Biden made gas and groceries unaffordable, tanked your savings, and caused this recession. But Beasley won't change a thing. So if you're stretched thin and had enough, you definitely can't afford Sherry Beasley.
All right, Sherry Beasley did have a horrible debate against Ted Budd, and it was pretty fascinating to watch her try and race as fast as she could away from all things Joe Biden, all things Democratic Party. Unfortunately, her record shows that she would be a rubber stamp for the Biden New Green Deal socialist agenda. And it's not just that Miss Beasley couldn't say whether she'll campaign with Biden and lied about Democrats recently hiring 87,000 new IRS agents. She refused to even acknowledge there's a crisis at the border. Okay, only 4.5 million people have entered the country illegally. And she harped on the obvious fact that we must fund the police. But there's a little bit of problem if you look at her background and her past positions on this. Unfortunately, she was not holding that position when it mattered. You look back at the summer of 2020 when we had 574 riots that killed dozens of Americans, injured thousands of cops. She said there is great value in tearing down the criminal justice system and rebuilding it. And we must recognize the legitimate pain of rioters. I'm like, no, we don't. They should be arrested and thrown in jail. That's simple. Said the same thing on January 6th. Very consistent on this program. Anyway, Ted Budd with his closing arguments. Ted, how are you? Glad you called, sir.
Sean, thanks for having me back on.
Look, the campaign's been going well. I think you've done a very good job of pointing out how radical Sherry Beasley is. She's certainly not in sync with the people of North Carolina, and I doubt very many people in North Carolina like record high inflation, gas prices, open borders, woke education, or I don't think many of them like this defund the police movement that she's a part of.
No, that's what folks are talking about out here. I mean, even today when I'm traveling across the eastern part of the state, when we're out in the mountains, they're talking about inflation, and they're talking about it not like a college professor, Sean. They're talking about it in very real terms, like this is the grocery cart that I could afford 2 years ago, but this is all I can afford now. Or how am I going to pay for, gas in my tank, groceries on my table, and get my kids new school supplies this year, just a couple of months ago. So it's tough for folks out there, and everything that Joe Biden has done and Sherry Beasley would do is completely going to wreck our economy even more and make things worse for people out there. And crime, education, those are the other two things people are talking about.
Well, it's such an important race for the entire Republican Party. You've run a great race, and I got to give you a lot of credit, and you were well prepared for that debate. I spent a lot of time watching most of the debates. Democratic candidates didn't fare well. They can't answer simple questions on Biden. They don't want, on the one hand, they don't want to be associated with him. And then on the other hand, they're trying to thread a needle and support his policies without saying they support his policies. So in almost every case, they end up being tongue-tied and incapable of actually debating.
Yeah, I would say that the issues are always on our side, but they're so clear that it's on our side this year. I mean, when it comes to what the Democrats are doing with defund the police, when it comes to inflation, when it comes to crime, whether that's crime at the border or crime locally, when it comes to parents just wanting a say in their kids' education without being called domestic terrorists, I think the issues are with us, Sean. And now everybody that's not intrinsically political out there, they're waking up and they're going, you know what, you're right. Republicans have got it right this year, and Joe Biden completely had it wrong, Sean. And Sherry Beasley would be just be a rubber stamp for everything that Joe Biden has done.
Well, this is as important a race as any other one. Thankfully, unlike other races we've been following, you've kept a pretty healthy lead most of the time, but it's still within 4 points. And whenever it's within 4 points or so, it's still within the margins. And so I'm saying to all our friends in North Carolina, please get out tomorrow and vote for Ted Budd. This Republicans taking over the House and the Senate is critical if we're to stop this agenda and start the process of trying to get America back on track again. It's that important. Anyway, hopefully Senator-elect by the next time we talk. Thanks, Ted Budd, for being with us.
God bless. Thanks.
800-941-SEAN if you want to join us. Wendy is in Utah. Wendy, how are you? Glad you called.
Great, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. I have two things to say, and then I'm going to let you say whatever you want, okay? One is everybody needs to go to Crown Burger. It's the best burger in the world. Period. End of sentence.
I was going to tell you.
Okay. I met the owner of Crown Burger. He's now become my best friend. I love him. Number two, I want everybody in Utah. Now, we've been getting the message out. Me and my buddy Rod Arquette and the great people at KNRS have told the story. Evan McMullen, Egg McMuffin as Rod calls him, has been running a campaign bought and paid for by the Democratic Party. You don't have a Democrat running in Utah this year. You have a guy that claims he's an independent, but all of his money is coming from radical Democratic groups like Act Blue, and we don't even know where all the money's coming from. I know some of the money came from them. And that we know the DNC, the Democratic Party itself, their Senate-elect committee has been sending money. They're all funding him. So he is beholden to the Democrats. And he's out there trying to convince the people of Utah that he's something that he's not. They're trying to say he's an independent. He's not an independent. He will be to the left of Mitt Romney, which speaks volumes. So I hope everybody in Utah understands that this is not a conservative that you're electing. This is a guy trying to portray himself as a conservative. Anyway, what's on your mind today?
Well, yes, I concur with you, Sean. The people of Utah will not stand for this. The man has no integrity, and he's proven that time and time and time again. He's trying to turn the state blue, which will never happen. So, yes, I agree with you that everyone just needs to get out. One of the callers a couple of weeks ago on Rod Arquette's show called in and said, well, I'm not going to vote for Mike Lee again because he promised he would never run again. And I'm thinking to myself, you're crazy. You know, Mike Lee needs to run again. Though he made that promise not to run again, sometimes promises have to be broken, Sean. And
I don't even recall that he made that promise. I didn't know that was even an issue.
That's what I was thinking too. And I said, when did he make that promise? And just because the gentleman said, well, he made that
constitutionally
promise,
has the right to run. Here's the problem.
Exactly.
Is that you've got one of the greatest constitutional minds as a U.S. senator, and it's from the great state of Utah. And it is a great state. And the people of Utah are wonderful people. And
thank you.
he is running an honest campaign, and you have a guy that's running a dishonest campaign. You know,
exactly.
There are 50 senators in Washington that are Republican, and 48 senators are supporting Mike Lee, and 49 senators if you include Mike supporting himself. There's only one senator that won't support Mike Lee, and that's Mitt Romney. And let me tell you where I think Mitt Romney's going with this. I think Mitt Romney's being too cute by half. Now remember, we knew Mitt Romney wasn't Ronald Reagan. We knew Mitt Romney wasn't as strong a conservative as I would prefer. but I knew he was a good man at the time, and I liked him, and I knew he'd be better than Obama. And everybody went all in to help him, and all he's done ever since is he's sort of imploded. This happens to a lot of presidential candidates. They lose an election, and they kind of lose it. Al Gore, John McCain, Mitt Romney, Hillary Clinton. And it's just disappointing that Mitt Romney wouldn't even support his fellow senator. But Mike doesn't need his support. He needs the support of everybody that goes to Crown Burger, everybody in Utah that is a real conservative. You need to get out and vote for Mike tomorrow. This has been you have a bought and paid for Democrat masquerading as an independent. And I don't want people to be lied to that way.
No, they shouldn't be lied to. And I think we can tell who has the integrity in this game. And I know Mike Lee, he has so much integrity just in his teeny little pinky. I just implore Utahns, please, 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 just get out there and vote and do what is critical, because we cannot let McMuffin win.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Have you ever wondered what the media and big tech is hiding from you? Like massive stories that actually affect you in your life that they don't want you to see because they make the left and the Biden administration look bad. Well, now there's a podcast dedicated to exposing all of that each and every day. So download the fastest growing podcast in the conservative movement, the Ben Ferguson Show podcast, right now. That's right. You can listen to Ben Ferguson Show podcast on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Download it right now. Have you ever wondered what the media and big tech is hiding from you? Like massive stories that actually affect you in your life that they don't want you to see because they make the left and the Biden administration look bad. Well, now there's a podcast dedicated to exposing all of that each and every day. So download the fastest growing podcast in the conservative movement, the Ben Ferguson Show podcast, right now. That's right. You can listen to Ben Ferguson Show podcast on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Download it right now.
This is the Sean Hannity Show.
All right, back to our busy phones. Herb is in Pennsylvania. Hey, Herb, how are you? Glad you called.
Hey, Sean. I'm doing great. Thank you for taking my call. First-time caller.
Thank you.
So, I'm an independent guy. When I was a kid, I was a Democrat, and then I realized it wasn't who I was and became independent. And I want to touch that. My girlfriend's a traveling ER nurse, and
by the way, that's a cool job because they're in demand everywhere, so you can work in all over the world even.
Yeah, but the problem is her oxygen level now is at a steady 92, 94. And she doesn't want to get any more of those boosters or anything from now on. She didn't want it from the get-go. And
don't tell me they're still requiring this, are they?
What's that?
Are they still requiring this crap? I don't pay any attention.
I don't know really, but all I know is she won't do them no more because her health is actually different now than it was prior, and that's for sure. I'm a small business owner. I own a landscape business, and I'm struggling now with the gas this year. And I was on the turnpike, and I just saw a sign that says Allentown Plaza, no diesel. So it is real.
I saw that same sign. Somebody sent it. I think Sweet Baby James gave it to me. And look, if you're a landscaper, I'll be very honest. For most people, there's only so much they're going to pay to get their yard taken care of. They're only going to budget X number of dollars, right? I mean, I have
jobs already because of the financial situation going on.
I believe it. And people are saying, you know what, I'm going to fire up the old lawnmower and do it myself. And by the way, I'm sure they hate every minute of it because the last thing I'd want to do on a weekend is go out and mow the lawn at this point in my life. I'd do it if I had to, but I don't feel like it. But you're right. The price of gas. How much are you averaging where you are per gallon?
It's around $4 for the unleaded regular, and it used to cost me about $400 a week for gasoline. Now I'm over almost $900 a week, so it's doubled.
So now you got to get more work you got to try and find more ways to make money to just stay even. And you're finding, and everybody's finding themselves in that situation.
I mean, the insurance alone, just that's $2,500 a month just in that. Where
in Pennsylvania are you?
I'm in Lehigh Valley, so I want to tell you something real quick. So a lot of people I know a lot of people. I might not be famous, but I know a lot of people all over the country, and a lot of people who are Democrat are voting for Oz. I just want to let you know that right now. A lot of independent and Democrat friends and family are voting Oz. I was down at the Borgata over the weekend, and I had a Trump stain shirt. I won't get into that. And there must have been hundreds of people who walked by and said, nice shirt, red wave coming. So it's real. I mean, what they're seeing on the media, it's going to be a close race, but it's not going to be that close because people woke up and they see the light, what's going on.
Listen, I can only go by what my gut tells me and what I read with polls. And when really good pollsters, the last poll in Pennsylvania for Oz with both Trafalgar and Insider Advantage had Oz up by 2. That tells me it's a very quintessentially tight Pennsylvania Senate race. And I'll tell you, if every person that is sick and tired of what is happening to this country and what Joe Biden and the Democratic Socialists have done to this country, if anybody has any knowledge of who John Fetterman is and how radical he is, open up the prisons, release half the population, convicted murderers, let them out on the street, Pennsylvania taxpayer money spent for heroin injection sites, moratorium on fracking, no limits on abortion. I just hope the people of Pennsylvania understand who this guy is, because if they do, they're not going to vote for him. A guy that never worked a day in his life. His whole life has been like he's in a Halloween costume, acting like he's something that he knows nothing about, and that's a working man. I know what being a working guy is about. I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. He doesn't. He's been a trust fund brat his whole life, and he puts on a costume and tries to pretend that he's one of us. He's not. Anyway, I appreciate the call. We're going to be watching Pennsylvania. We need you tomorrow. We need that seat. It's a hold seat. It's a very important seat. Know what you're dealing with. 800-941-SEAN if you want to join us.
You'll hear what everyone really thinks in D.C. This is the Sean Hannity Show.
All right, 25 now till the top of the hour. 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Our friend John Solomon, who is the editor-in-chief of justthenews.com, investigative reporter, actually has a tape of the wife of Colorado Senator Michael Bennet talking about quietly reallocating funds from the police to mental health. In other words, we're going to defund the police, but we're not going to be honest about it. We're going to hide it. We're going to use other terms, and we're going to make it so that you don't know what's happening. Listen.
And I honestly wonder, like, these people who say, no, on our side, we're not for defunding the police, do they mean it? Or are they saying that just to, like, placate people? Like, I don't even know anymore.
Are people actually going to back away from it, or are they just trying to, like...
Well, I mean, I think that, I think Michael would say, calling it defund the police was probably not the smartest move at the outset.
Yes.
Because that's not really what we're talking about. But everything is partisan, right? Like anything that can become a wedge issue is these days. And so probably the smartest thing is to try to take the temperature down and get, just quietly. The most successful efforts in Washington, D.C. are the ones that you never see on the front page of the paper.
The most successful ones, I love that.
Yeah, there are things that nobody's talking about, and that's where the success happens, because then you can work together. And, so like, maybe we need to just quit talking about it for a half a second and let the temperatures come down, and then quietly allocate some funding to mental health, right? And to interventions that can help, and maybe not call police reform, but,
and take it away from...
strategically ways to do it that would...
Well, isn't that what they...
effective, but, not raise the flag.
Isn't that what they did with the inflation bill? Like, so many great things happened in that bill.
Yeah,
so many climate things.
Right.
Unbelievable. John Solomon, investigative reporter, editor-in-chief, justthenews.com, is with us. I won't ask how you got the tape, but that's Michael Bennett's wife, the senator from Colorado. And Joe Day, we've had him on a couple of times on the program. Nice guy, great working class background. He runs his own construction business. He's done a great job for somebody that comes out of the private sector to run for office. It's not an easy lift, and that race has tightened quite a bit. It's a little
toss-up. Yeah.
Well, look, do I think we can win Colorado? Boy, that would be a huge upset, but certainly deserved. This is what I get out of the tape. Now, you tell me if I'm wrong, John Solomon. I hear people saying, oh, if we say defund, dismantle the police, if we say no bail laws, that's not really working well. So we're not going to tell the people the truth that we are defunding the police. We're just going to say that we're reallocating funds for mental health. And then this way they'll feel better about it.
That's right. That's exactly what you heard. This tape was made by two investigative journalists working for Accuracy in Media. They went up to the door, did some door knocking, captured the senator's wife. Her name is Susan Daggett. And she said out loud the unspoken rule that a lot of Democrats have been saying behind closed doors from what we are reporting indicates, which is we still want to defund the police, but we're going to call it something else. We're going to call it reallocation. You've seen Mandela Barnes make this claim. He used the code where we're going to reallocate funds. That is just another way of saying we're defunding the police, but we're not going to use a term because it has, the American public caught on. She says out loud the unwritten rules of democratic politics, and that's what makes this so extraordinary. And, with her husband in a tight, close race, Colorado voters have something else to think about. She says a couple times, Michael didn't want to use that term. That's not the term you want to use. And so you get the sense that she and her husband both subscribe to this philosophy of tell the American public one thing and then do what you want.
And of course, nobody in the media is ever going to bring it up. It's interesting. I know that Congress, they had a very partisan January 6th committee with a predetermined outcome. Everybody on the committee voted to impeach Donald Trump. Nancy Pelosi refused to allow Jim Jordan and Jim Banks to be on the committee, so the fix was in from the beginning. And now they're trying to get Donald Trump to testify before the committee, which I think is a joke, because I'm sure the president will invoke executive privilege and fight that in the courts. And by the time that case is over, they will be long gone, and that will be long disbanded, is my guess. And anyway, but we did have a Democratic Party. We had 574 riots in the summer of 2020. We had dozens of dead Americans. You remember the bricks, the rocks, the bottles, the Molotov cocktails fired at police officers all over the country. Billions in property damage, thousands of injured cops. And there's no committee investigating this.
None.
Now, you have to ask, why do they only care about the one riot that they can politicize? Why did they only care about the one incidence of violence that happened to Paul Pelosi, which we should all care about? And I believe the Speaker of the House should have Secret Service protection at all times. I thought that's why Nancy Pelosi had use of our aircraft that we pay for as taxpayers to fly to and fro San Francisco for safety and security, which I would support for a speaker. But what about, the North Carolina candidate that had a bullet fired in his window, or Lee Zeldin that was attacked on stage? A guy tried to knife him, or the gang shooting outside the front of his house. Or over the weekend, Carrie Lake's office gets an envelope with white powder in it. You don't hear anybody discussing any of those things. John Solomon.
Well, you're right. Listen, the Democrats have run a dual operation. The duplicity that you hear in Susan Daggett's words has been how they were for defunding the police, except for the Capitol Police, because that scored political points. They are for the truth, except when they want to lie to you, like things like the border is really secure, when every American can look with their own eyes and say, of course it's not secure. The Democrats have run a duplicitous, say one thing, do another thing for the last 2 years. And if the polls turn out the way the pollsters say it looks like, you're going to see them pay a great penalty. The American people can't be fooled. They're much smarter than the Democrat elitists and their media propsters currently acknowledge. And I think tomorrow American voters get a chance to say, you didn't pull the wool over our eyes, you're fired. And I think that that's what tomorrow's election is about. It's not so much about electing Republicans as it is sending a message to the Democrats. That's what the polling shows. People are fed up with the Democrats' approach. They're not listening to the American people. They've been talking past the American people.
Let's look into John Solomon's crystal ball. Not your first rodeo, John. I'm very wary when people talk about wave elections. There's only one poll that really matters, and that's what happens tomorrow. I would argue foundationally, everything is in place to have a wave election. It would not surprise me one bit if we had one. I think we should have one. I think they have failed on a spectacular level. But a lot of these races, at least looking at it from the polling standpoint, Georgia and New Hampshire and Pennsylvania and especially Arizona, et cetera, and Nevada, these races, the state of Washington, they're all very close. What do you see happening in the Senate and the House tomorrow?
I've been talking to everyone on the ground, Democrats who have their own internal tracking poll, Republicans have their own tracking poll. There's a couple phenomenon to watch out for. Republicans are more enthusiastic, Democrats more ashamed of the record. So Democrats may not be polling as honestly as in past elections where they tend to be the enthusiastic pollster. So there could be some overstatement of conservative support. But I think most people, Democrat, Republicans, see a minimum of 2 Republican seat pickup in the Senate, maybe about 20 to 25 in the House. And if things break, and some of this exuberance is real, that isn't overstated conservative or understated Democrat, you could see a 5-seat pickup in the Senate and maybe as much as 35 in the House. But I think we ought to be, this is an election where people are making a decision to fire one party rather than embrace a party. Usually a wave election has a combination of both, right? You're firing someone and you're really enamored with the new person. Donald Trump, a good example of that in 2016. This one here, we have to watch and see how much enthusiasm the Republican commitment with America is generating. And we'll know tomorrow. We'll get a good sense. If Lee Zeldin is winning in New York at 10 o'clock tomorrow night, 11 o'clock tomorrow night, probably a bigger day for Republicans. If that stays traditionally blue, then it might be a smaller election day. But Zeldin is one of my first ones.
I don't know if Zeldin's going to be the bellwether, though. New York is so solidly blue. Now, listen, I'm supporting Lee. I'm going out to vote for Lee. If it's even close in New York, that's going to be a big story.
It is. And then watch in the early races. Florida, there's a couple Central Florida Democrat races. If those turn red, that's going to be a real sign. Virginia has 2, Virginia 2, Virginia 9. If those turn red, it's going to be a good night for Republicans. But those are the early races to watch. Some of the ones out west might take a day or so to figure out. Washington State, Nevada looks good for Republicans. I think all the Republicans are up in those polls there. So Arizona is starting to trend really well for Republicans. So as we move across the country, the early bellwethers are going to be those Virginia, Florida congressional races. What happens in New Hampshire and New York, which nobody gave Republicans a chance on 2 months ago. The fact that we're talking about them being competitive is a shocker.
John Solomon, editor-in-chief, justthenews.com. John, thank you. This election eve, 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of the program. Sometime during this program tomorrow, I will have what they call some of the exit poll information. I have my sources. I will get a hold of it as early as possible, and pass on anecdotally what I can to you, what they're seeing. But exit polls have been notoriously wrong too. I don't want you to put your faith in it, especially if you're in a state where there's still voting going on. Maybe we should stop that practice, Linda. What do you think?
I mean, I think that we're in a really difficult spot, right? We've done the exit polls. I remember doing the exit polls in 2020 and just being like, oh God, this doesn't look good. And I remember doing it in 2016. If you remember, we had Donald Trump on, we had Don Jr. on at 5:00 on election day. And the Panhandle and the Rust Belt needed to come out and vote. And Donald Trump himself came on at 5:30 and changed everything.
Listen, I'll take it back further. Remember, the exit polls showed in 2004 that Bush and Cheney were losing in Florida and in Ohio. Dick Cheney got off a plane at 5:35 and called this program saying where he'd seen the polls. He thought it was over, and begging the people in Ohio and Florida to vote. It's amazing.
But I think you've done a really good job this time around, Sean. I mean, this time around, we've kind of told everybody, regardless of whether we think that the red wave is coming or not, you need to go out, you need to vote. And even, it's kind of like we get so many callers, and I'm addressing this for Katie's benefit because poor Katie gets inundated with people calling in about, election integrity issues and I don't trust the system. And that's totally fine. And we respect that. We agree that there are mail-in ballot issues and, dates on ballot, all the things. We're aware. But at the end of the day, it's the process we have, and you got to go out and vote. You got to go out and do it. It's your civic duty.
I would love to have same-day voting and paper ballots. All right, I want to get Paul the Libertarian in Illinois. Paul, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Oh, hey, Sean. Yeah, I'm a libertarian, and I just wanted to comment, on some of the remarks made that have been over the past week about libertarians running in three-way races. I think it's important to recognize the main reason why a lot of libertarians are running in these races that they're very unlikely to win. It's because of the suppressive ballot access laws that are on the books that keep them off the ballot. So In Illinois, for example, a Libertarian has to turn in 25,000 signatures just to appear on the ballot for the same office that a Republican and Democrat needs to turn in only 3,000 signatures for. And the only way to change that is for the third party candidate to get a particular percentage of the vote.
Let me tell you, because I got to cut to the chase here, and I want to have this conversation with you. And you've heard me say I love my libertarian friends. Neil Bortz was on the air in Atlanta and around the country for years. Friend of mine, brilliant guy, great host, and he was a libertarian. And for years we'd go back and forth. I'm like, you're telling people to vote libertarian, and what's going to happen is you're bleeding away conservative votes or Republican votes, and unfortunately, that often can be a game changer. So right now it's a two-party system, and so I'm never going to love or agree with every single issue that every Republican's running on, but you got to understand it works. In the case of Blake Masters, I don't know if he would have a chance tomorrow if the Libertarians stayed in the race. Does that make sense? I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, Sean, I'll just, say this then. Ironically, it's the existence of these ballot access laws that are on the books that are the motivation for these candidates to run for office. Winning's one goal, sure, but realistically, a lot of times the Libertarian knows where they are. They know where they poll. They know where they stand. And if these ballot access laws can be overcome by them getting a certain percentage of the vote, then their campaign strategy would change dramatically. They wouldn't be running in races that they couldn't win. They would go and look for the race where there is no Republican running in deep blue Chicago, where maybe a libertarian vote or a libertarian message would resonate more than a Republican.
I want you to know something. I have way more in common with libertarians than with anybody else. Rand Paul, let's be honest, he's a libertarian. He runs as a Republican, but he's very libertarian, and there's very little we disagree with Rand Paul on. We like him a lot. We respect him a lot. All right, it's Election Eve night in America. Hannity tonight, 9 Eastern. Set your DVR. Fox News. We got a great lineup tonight. Herschel Walker with Lindsey Graham. Also Glenn Youngkin and Dr. Oz. We have our pollsters, Robert Cahaley and Matt Towery, Kellyanne Conway, Mike Huckabee, Ari Fleischer, and much more. Hannity, 9 Eastern. Fox. We'll see you tonight. Back here for Election Day coverage tomorrow. America, it's in your hands. We'll get the government we deserve. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for making this show possible.
Have you ever wondered what the media and big tech is hiding from you? Like massive stories that actually affect you in your life that they don't want you to see because they make the left and the Biden administration look bad. Well, now there's a podcast dedicated to exposing all of that each and every day. So download the fastest growing podcast in the conservative movement, the Ben Ferguson Show podcast right now. That's right. You can listen to Ben Ferguson Show podcast on iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Download it right now.